Let's talk about how to look rich or put together in an outfit for the 1850s and early 1860s. Good day everyone, my name is Caitlin. I'm a living historian who educates other living historians by teaching old-fashioned sewing skills and copying original garments. This is our series called Improve Your Impression, where we pick a time period of about 10-ish years, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, and deep dive in it for a year to really hone in our impression and improve ourselves as living historians. Last year we did the early 1840s all the way up till about 1852, and this year we're just continuing, so we're doing 1853 to about 1862. We've already talked about where to find resources, how to pick fabrics, how to pick patterns, getting dressed, the layers. We've made a nightgown, we've made a dress without a pattern. We've talked about how to look poor, or as a commentator said, because I had a hard time describing it because it wasn't just poor, she said 1860s like blue collar women. And I was like, you know what, that actually does make sense. Women who are actively engaged in work. And so this time we're going to talk about the opposite. Women who are not necessarily engaged in active work. These could be working class women in their best dresses. It could be like middle class women in their everyday clothes, that sort of thing. And then afterwards we're going to talk about, now that we have, we've talked about how to look blue collar or working, and also how to dress a little bit more fancier. We're going to talk about like how that works and how you can really portray a super wealthy person. Because again, all the layers are the same. The layers don't really change much. There are cultures that of course do things a little bit differently, but most people in westernized countries are going to be wearing the same layers. And they're also going to be wearing basically the same lines of clothes. What changes are the fabrics, the quality of fabrics, the trims, the types of trims, that sort of thing. So what we're going to discuss today still applies to a lot of working class women. So you have to think of like shopkeepers or even like millineresses or dressmakers are going to not be like in dirt work like we talked about last month. They're going to be dressed up a little nicer. They're going to be on the lower end of nicer with maybe some of their materials and such, but they're going to look very put together to our eyes. So what we're going to do, we're going to do the same thing we did last month. So I've collected 22 images from our time period, and we're just going to dissect them and what we're seeing. Some of these are photographs, some of them are oil paintings, and we're just going to look at them and just see what is being worn by these women. I really like doing this because it helps us discern what is being worn. Sometimes when you look at, or maybe you read wardrobe list, or maybe you look at original garments, and then it is a different thing to see it put together in an outfit and understand how things are being worn. Like all things in research, you can't ever take just one thing and just focus on that all the time. You can't just take original garments and only study original garments without any other resources and just expect to be a good living historian. It takes a lot more than just studying original garments. It takes studying dressmakers' manuals. It takes studying photographs to see how these things were actually worn. Wardrobe lists and laundry lists to see how many garments the average person owned. All of that. So again, with everything, you can't just take one source. You have to use them all together so that they all kind of cooperate one another, so that we get a fuller, more round picture of the time period we're portraying. So let's start with our images. They are in no particular order. I got them at the same time I got last month's videos or images, and I know I said last month I probably should have put them in like chronological order, but I didn't think about it. So let's go to our images. All right, this is our first one. So this is actually a millineress. So a lady who is, she's a working lady, but she makes bonnets. And so again, we're gonna see some working people still. They're dressed not in things you would be like butchering a pig in, essentially. So let's look at her. This is mid-1850s. We see that very fashionable hair that we have seen plenty of times before last month. Lots of bonnets, gorgeous bonnets. This one's really nice. You could see some different bonnets. They're kind of blurry, but you can see them. She's inside somewhere, so there's wallpaper, and you see a little bit of the interior. The pretty little bonnets. So back to her. She has, again, quite fashionable hair for the early mid-1850s. It's always fun to see. I don't know if I think that might be the wallpaper. I thought I saw earrings, but I think it's the wallpaper. Embroidered collar, maybe border on glaze, maybe some other type of white work, but some sort of white work. Very nicely corseted. You can clearly tell she is corseted. It looks like she has button closure maybe down the front. This looks like maybe a chatelaine, maybe there's three of them, so it's probably more of a chatelaine. Which this might be the first time I've seen a chatelaine in a period image. They don't show up very often. They're not as common as people like to make you think they are. But Yeah, that looks like kind of like a chatelaine, and it's gold. It could be a watch chain, but given that there's 3 of them, I think there's probably a chatelaine. So we have nice little funnel sleeves, very popular. Open under sleeves, so you see her arm here. She is wearing bracelets, so there is some jewelry. This could be hair bracelets. They could be gutta percha. They could be bog oak. Something that's a little bit cheaper. I mean, the hair jewelry wasn't necessarily super cheap, but that could be like a memento piece or just something from family, that sort of thing. But notice that there's a pair of bracelets. Typically, this is what you're going to see in the period. Very rarely will you see one bracelet being worn. Typically, you're going to see matching bracelets, one on each arm, or multiples, that match on each arm. It's a pair of bracelets that you would wear. So we're still seeing that here. Again, nicely corseted. That dress does appear to be silk. It could be a silk blend. Working women could definitely afford silk. That was not an unusual thing, especially if they bought it secondhand. That's not a big deal at all. But this is like a very nice, this might be her nicest dress. It might be just a middling dress for her, but there's nothing particularly fancy about it. Like, I wouldn't say she's a wealthy woman. There's no trim on it. The skirt is a little bit on the narrower side. Maybe not the best fitted up in the armpit area, but it's still made for her. It's still a nice dress. It's just not maybe the fanciest thing that you're going to see. All right, this one we have mom and 2 girls and a little boy over here. He's still in his little dress, but that is a little boy based on his hair and just his facial features, and the fact that this is more of a boy style dress. Boys tend to have shorter dresses than girls. Anyway, this is later 1850s, so like mid to late 1850s. Covering her ears with her hair, that was very popular in this particular time period. She may have a net on or some sort of hair adornments because we see something that may be glistening on her. Her dress could be wool, could be silk, could be a blend, but fitted bodice. She has a nice embroidered, very wide collar brooch. So we can get a little closer in on that. She's wearing a belt, nicely fitted bodice. Looks like her dress closes with buttons and buttonholes, small ones. That dropped arm side, which we did see in the last image, I just didn't point it out, but she has a dropped arm side. Double puff sleeves with more of a pagoda type look. There's some slight trim. This is very cheap trim, but it's trim. It's just like a velvet ribbon. Typically, she has open undersleeves. That's one thing I love about the 1850s is their open undersleeves. It is so much cooler than having closed undersleeves, in my opinion. She's wearing a ring. Again, bracelets in there. She has a pair of them. So you do see that. Can't see any rings on that side of the finger. No trim on her skirt. It doesn't look like. It's quite plain, which would not be unusual. So with trim, very rarely will you see trim only on a skirt. If it's going to be only somewhere, it's usually on the sleeves, only on the sleeves. Sometimes you'll see just on sleeves, sometimes you'll see on sleeve and bodice, but if there's going to be anything on the skirt, then there has to be something at the bodice or the sleeves. It just doesn't look proportionally right otherwise, and typically that's what you see on original garments, is not just trim on the skirt, but it needs to have something matching up top, either on the sleeves or on the bodice. But this is a very lightly trimmed dress, but still quite nice. I mean, we see it. She has a fancy collar on. It's still nicely fitted. Again, belt. Some nice accessories. Open undersleeves are fun. And again, a little bit of trim on that dress. So this is another one. I love that you see her bonnet. So she is wearing, again, one piece of dress. This one, let's say, is later 1850s. She is wearing a plaid dress. Now this could be, it looks like there's in tiers maybe. So there's like a one layer here, maybe another layer down here, or maybe that's just a very deep tuck. That's what it looks like to me, and the fact that this plaid is off slightly suggests that. It could be a giant tuck. That would be very odd to have. If it is a tuck, then that is a sheer dress just because of how thick this part is. But it also could just be part of the plaid. I don't think so though. I think that's some sort of either a tiered situation where this is the part that overlaps, and that's where we see it, or a giant tuck. And I think a tiered or a layered skirt would be more common here. Looks like she's wearing a silk mantle over top, and there is some lace. This is a very nice detail, plenty of nice fine trim. Is that a cockade? Is she wearing a cockade? I think she's wearing a cockade. That's cool. Creative Cockades. Heather Sheen does excellent cockades if you are in the market for cockades. That's where I would suggest going for that. But she's very nice lace. Lace is something that's quite expensive in the time period. Like, we're talking hundreds of dollars, and that's in 1850s and 60s money. So lace is something to show that you have wealth. If you're looking to add, you look wealthy, lace is where to go, but you can't just use any lace. Like, there's nothing modern that would substitute for period lace. So typically we have to find the original stuff, which I have a hard time using. It's a rough conundrum there. There might be some sort of, what is that called? It's an earlier thing, like an 18th century thing where you kind of have flowers, like a tussie mussy. Is that what it's called? I forget. Anyway, she has gloves on. Looks like closed under sleeves, open sleeves. She has silk ribbon on her sleeves. This may be a silk dress. Again, it looks like it's sheer, so it could be a variety of fibers. They had sheer wools. It could be sheer cotton, sheer silk. It could be a blend. Really hard to tell from photographs. I would say the mantle is probably silk based on the sheen and the fact that it's trimmed with lace. That would be quite common. But it looks like there's some silk ribbons on her sleeves, just a little bit more decoration. So that would be a cheaper dress trim. Ribbons are cheaper. It looks like there's a ruffle of self fabric on the bottom or the edge of her sleeves. You can see the inside of her sleeve just a little bit here. Typically that's going to be faced in silk, just like for a couple of inches. That way it looks like you lined the whole thing in silk, but the rest of it would just be cotton. Occasionally you'll see them fully lined in silk, but that's not necessarily the most common thing. We see a little bit of her dress down here. She has the smaller collar, typical in this time period. Her bonnet is gorgeous. That might be horsehair, that might be straw. Also there's a silk curtain, trim mostly around her face. That's very common in the later 1850s. If you notice, trims will start out by your ears in the 1840s, and they go up to the mid 1850s, and then by the later 1850s, they're like all the way around your face, and then they start going up and up and up, and by the mid 1860s or early mid 1860s, they're just concentrated at the head, and there's no trim except for like the ruffle on the side. So that's kind of fun to watch and see. But yeah, very nice. We can't see a lot of her hair, but it looks like it might cover her ears, which in this time period would be quite fashionable. Maybe a silk ribbon that looks like it matches the curtain there. Nice little ties, wide. Notice they're wide. She does have shorter ties. You see ties in a variety of lengths. Do notice that they're not dovetailed in. I think we like to dovetail our ribbons. I have not seen maybe one original photograph with dovetailed edges. Usually they're cut straight across, or sometimes or also at a diagonal, but they don't do the dovetail where it's like that V cutout that we like to do today. That seems to be a later thing. Also notice that these are cut at an angle, or maybe straight. That one looks straight, that one looks like an angle. And there's the same ribbon here, so I wonder if that's a belt. It definitely matches the sleeve ribbons. So we might be seeing some sort of like sash or something there. But yeah, very nice image. The mantle is quite nice. Like, that is showing some wealth there. The dress could be either or, but the lace is very nice. So I'd say probably at least middle class for her. This is a evening scene. So we have she's really hard to see, but we'll dissect them a little bit. This is later 1850s. Looks like we have some jewelry on. This is evening hair, so we see a variety. She's more of a teenager, but we still see some hair being put up, covering the ears, which again, popular in the later 1850s. I'm trying to think of why I picked this image, because it's very hard to see. This may not have been the best image to pick. Nice trims. If you have an evening gown, you are of some level of standing in society to have an evening dress specifically for evening. And they had ones that are silk. That one I would say would be silk taffeta, just based on the way it's laying. I could be wrong, but looks like silk. It looks like that's a double layer skirt, which would be popular. I can't tell if that's her bodice or something that's going on the table. It looks like maybe her bodice. We have covering the ears. She has some sort of headdress on right here. Pairs of bracelets. I can't see her on there. She's a bracelet, so she probably has a pair of bracelets. There's a plaid there, solid. That one might be cotton. There are some very fine sheer cottons that were more expensive than silk. And that could be something that we're seeing here. Love the slight tinting of this one. And the trim is just fun. It's really fun. And yes, sometimes they do have some very low cut evening gowns. I mean, they're not, her nipple line is here, so she is definitely covered. This, well, I mean, like an inch covered. And then this is her tucker, which I need to do a video on how to make a tucker. It's basically a little, it's like what a collar does for a day dress, a tucker does for evening wear. And so they're quite common. They're also very disposable, so you don't often see them still on originals. Usually we just see remnants, like threads that would have been used to attach. But yeah, it looks like she's wearing a tucker. It's hard to tell with the other ladies. They likely are, though. I would love to see her trim, though. That trim looks fun. All right, this one is later 1850s, potentially very, very early 1860s. Love her sleeves. Her sleeves are fabulous. Anyway, let's just look over here, covering the ears. Again, popular hairstyle in this time period. Notice how low it's getting in the back, and how, you know, we used to in the mid 1850s, we had the fullness over here, closer to the forehead or closer to the ears. Notice how it's now down near the chin and the lower cheekbones. That's what's going to date this image. Even nice. That looks like it could be crochet, tatted, or knitted collar. Notice how fine it is. It's like thread weight yarns. And this may be laid over top of her dress, not tucked in. Sometimes I find that with, you know, the worked collars like that. She has, that looks like a brooch over top of her collar. And then buttons. I'm not sure what the white things are versus, that is interesting. I'm not sure what we're seeing there, but it's also a very grainy image. Not the best fitting dress I've ever seen, but it's not bad. There's a little wrinkly, you know, there. Her sleeves are fun. I love her sleeves. This is a bishop sleeve, essentially. It's smaller at the top than it is very quite full at the bottom, which is just one of the variations of bishop sleeves. People think bishop sleeves are so boring. There's so many variations of them, which is fun. And then she, you know, has them kind of cut off and trimmed. This might be silk, this might be velvet. And basically there's little cutouts where you can see her beautiful undersleeves underneath, which is a great way to show off, you know, the sleeves that you have or the undersleeves that you have, which could be quite fine and nice. No belt. Belts are not required. Her little cap sleeve up here mimics this little Van Dyke triangle bit that's on the lower bits of her sleeve. She also has that up here. Make it look very nice put together. This is probably a silk dress. It could be a silk wool blend. Could be wool. Some wools were kind of shiny. Straight across waist, looks like they are knife pleats, and plain skirt. This is another one we're seeing sleeve trim, no bodice trim, no skirt trim. But still a nice image. She doesn't have really many accessories. It's just a nice put together dress. Like this does not say wealthy at all. It just says, this is my nice dress. Here's another one. So, fashionable hair. This is earlier 1860s. So fashionable hair, you can see the fullness kind of at the size, probably a little bit higher than the last lady that we saw, but this is still within the realm of normal. We have a nice small little collar, very nice neat trim, large beautiful brooch. It looks like hers probably closes with hooks and eyes, maybe pins. She has a belt with a lovely little belt buckle, which is beautiful. And then she has this beautiful printed dress. This could be wool. This could be cotton. It is gathered at the waist, which could be cotton. Typically you don't see cottons that are darted. So let me go to the last image real quick. These are darts. That's how they're so fitted. Hers is gathered. But you do see silk and wool dresses gathered as well. I have come across people who think that you don't find silks and wools in gathered. And if you have a silk wool, it has to be darted. And if you have cotton, it has to be gathered. That is not true. We almost never see cotton dresses that are darted. However, we do see silks and wools that are gathered. So that does not mean this is cotton. Again, it could be wool. She has some mitts on, which would be a little bit unusual in this time period. These are not going to be any type of mitts that you can get today. They're not made of nylon or polyester. They are thread weight, very fine, somewhat expensive to do. And they are typically netted, not crocheted or anything like that. Typically they are netted. I believe there are some ladies magazines that have some patterns. And there was a lady for about a year or so ago who was selling kits to do them. I don't remember who that was. Maybe it was Deborah DeFranco. I don't remember. It was in a forum I was on, and she posted that she had kits available. And I almost got one and I forgot about it, and I think they sold out because Netting is something I very much want to learn. Very much. So they're around in the early 60s. They're not the most common accessory. We see them a lot more at reenactments than we ought to, and we don't see them in the styles or the patterns that we ought to see them. But they do show up in the 60s. It's not a super unusual choice. All right, so another mid-1850s. We have a puppy dog, and she's in winter clothes. So we're going to just dissect a little bit of her winter stuff. These are, again, mid-1850s. Beautiful veil, which is lace. Lace veils are going to be more expensive than the silk ones or the netted ones necessarily. So this is a little bit more of an expensive veil. You can see how the fullness is at the sides of her bonnet, which dates this as 1850s. Hair's still fashionable. We have nice long bonnet ribbons, again cut at an angle, not dovetailed. Fur collar, fur muff. Notice the size of the muff. They tend to be, this is actually a little bit on the larger size. They really ought to be just big enough for your hands and just a little bit bigger than that. The giant ones we see in the 18th century. We don't see giant ones in this time period. We do have undersleeves that are dark, which could be woolen undersleeves. Those did definitely exist, woolen undersleeves, given the fact that she's in her furs, would not surprise me. They are closed undersleeves, meaning that they have a cuff here, so they're not open to expose your arm, which would also make sense, again, if they were wool. Her dress could be wool. It kind of has that nice broadcloth texture to it. It is a solid, so it was probably not cotton. We have trim, again, that plain set, either velvet or silk trim on the sleeves. They look to be like they might be pagoda sleeves, just how open they are. They could be a funnel sleeve as well. Not a lot of detail, but I did like just to show her bonnet, how pretty that is. I love the little coloring, what they colored. Her lace veil, which shows a little bit of wealth. You know, her little winter accessories, because I know a lot of you do live in places where you get to wear winter accessories. I have winter accessories that I don't get to wear because I don't live in a place that gets cold frequently. All right, this is earlier 1850s. And so we have full round hair here. It looks like she's missing a tooth. That's just, I think, missing part of the photograph. See how we're missing pieces? It just looks like it. No jewelry really of any to speak with except for her cross necklace. I believe Beth Miller Hall has some Gutta Percha like crosses and such. She has little bows here and here. This is basically a basque. This does not, to me, look like a canizou. There's like two different types of garments. There are the ones that are being worn as a bodice, like an over bodice, and then there's ones that you wear over like low-necked, I guess, evening type gowns is what we would say, to make it more appropriate for day wear. And that is what she looks like she's doing. So this is typically it's going to be a silk. This looks kind of like a brocade, and you can see the line of her dress here. So she has like a boat neck here, and so it's just a nice, not super low cut, but nice evening dress, and she just has this over top to make it more appropriate for day. This is an earlier 1850 style. It's like more of a basque style. So we have the skirted part to the bodice. You don't typically see that in the 60s versions of a canizou. And canizous are going to be out of very fine materials. You can see how sheer this is, like the fact that we can see her dress underneath. We see some sort of trim or lace up there. Like this is a very nice fabric. So this can be silk, this can be cotton, but when we're talking cotton, we're talking period muslin, like mull or a type of voile, something like that. Not necessarily cottons that are inexpensive that you can mostly get today. You'd have to special order something like this. Looks like she has silk ribbons on her sleeves, which match, maybe match the silk ribbons on, looks like there's 3 of them, on the basque. I'm going to call it more of a basque. Now she is unusual. She does not have pairs of bracelets. She has 2 bracelets maybe on one hand and nothing on the other, which would be unusual. She has a ring on this finger though. So some jewelry, nicer dress. I find this canizou basque thing over a low neck evening gown. I see it more often on younger women than I do older. I'm not saying you can't wear it if you're older. I'm just saying I see it more often. It's another earlier mid 1850s. So we start up here. So again, fuller hair, not up here like it would be a little bit earlier. So it's a little bit more on the sides. We do see that slow progression down from the fullness up here to the fullness here to the fullness down here. She is wearing earrings, a nice either plain or maybe embroidered collar brooch. Her dress closes at the back. 3 darts, which you do see. I own an original with 3 darts. It's not the most usual, but you do see it. Funnel sleeves, looks like there is braid work or some sort of trim on the sleeves here. She has open undersleeves, which we've already talked about is like one of my favorites. I absolutely love open undersleeves. They're so much fun. And then she has a pair of bracelets. These may be velvet. They could be chenille. It's like silk chenille. She has something in her hand. She is wearing a ring too. But there's something there, maybe a necklace or something she's holding. But this is a very deep V holdover from the 1840s type bodice. But still very nicely put together outfit. This is 1859. This is a basque, so what we were looking at before. She's wearing it. Typically you'll see these with either silk or wool skirts. You don't see them a lot. You don't really see them with cotton unless that cotton is super, super sheer. She has some sort of hat or bonnet that's on the ground. Or that's his. That's his kerchief and hat. She's wearing her hat. It's more of a garden hat. You don't see those types of hats very often. Silk ribbons down everywhere. But nice little basket you pulled in at the waist with the belt. Some sort of maybe necktie or neck bow instead of a brooch. No undersleeves, it doesn't look like, or either that or they're open. But all these sheer things you don't have to. So this is a very nice later 1850s. You see how long the basket is. This can go up to about 1860, 1861. And the basket disappears for just like a year or so, and then it comes back a little bit different. But this is a very nice, funnel sleeve, dropped armscye, plain. Like it's plain. This is a nicer outfit because of how expensive these materials would be. They're a little bit more on the expensive side. This one is 1857. This is one of my favorite paintings. I love this one. So she is wearing a silk veil with silk ribbon. This is her bonnet, trims all the way around, hair covering her ears, quite fashionable. There's a fun little hat in the background. Like there's so many things you can see. There's suspenders in the background. Here are, these are some worked slippers that you could have purchased. Photographs, all sorts of fun things that you can see. So she has beautiful red ribbons, again cut at an angle. Bodice is nicely fitted, darts. She has some sort of cutaway here to expose trim, which means this is probably a silk dress, especially, oh yeah, definitely given the double layer skirt. This fabric I would call a la disposition, which means the fabric is woven on purpose to be made into a dress like this. Like there are panels specifically for the skirt. You get something that's slightly different, but still matching for the bodice. There are a la disposition dresses in collections. I think the Met has a few of them. Dropped arm size we've seen before. Nice fancy sleeve. We see silk ribbons. We see maybe a little bit of lace. We see some fringe. This is like very quintessential 1857 to about 1859 is where I love the dresses. They are so cupcake and frilly. They're gorgeous. Open undersleeve. This is very, very nice, light, fine, lacy fabric. Trimmed with some silk ribbon. She has pink. I don't think we would have put these colors together, but it's just interesting to see how it just works. They weren't as concerned with matching things as we would be today. So it's totally fine that your bonnet is a different color than your ribbons. It's just different than the ribbons here, which is different than the ribbons here. She has some gloves on. They are going to be wrist length. You see them here. Maybe she's wearing some bracelets perhaps. But yeah, wrist length gloves. Even for evening wear, we're not going to see the long gloves until about 20 years after our time period, 20 to 30 years. The short wrist length gloves are going to be what we see for evening wear and for day wear. All right, we talked about this lady last time. This is 1855. We're going to talk about her fancier visitors. So these ladies are coming in from the hall, so they're fancier. So we see bonnets on them. There's a little bit blurry, but we can see bonnets covering the covering the ears with their hair. They have little silk ribbon bows for their bonnets. They're both wearing dresses, so she has a nice full bodice on her dress. She's not, well, I guess she has some sort of shawl or something. I can kind of see something I can sort of see something right here that's laying across. So she had a shawl for her outerwear. Gloves. She has a little green parasol. Which is fun, but beautiful blue dress, maybe open sleeves. Looks like maybe closed under sleeves, but it's kind of hard to tell. This lady has a yellow dress on. She has closed undersleeves. Those are probably her undersleeves that we're seeing there. And she has a mantle. This is what a mantle looks like. And nothing about this says super, super wealthy fancy. These are very nice dresses. So they could be wealthier, but they don't necessarily have to be. I'd be curious to know whether the dogs are theirs or the dogs belong to the house. Or maybe this one belongs to her and this one belongs to the house. I don't know. Anyway, she has a parasol as well. Parasols, you can see how tiny they are. Parasols in this time period are quite small. Really, when you're dressed like this, the only thing that needs shaded is your face. And so why carry a giant monstrosity of a parasol when all you need to shade is this right here? Everything else is covered. So it just makes it more convenient. You can sit on your lap in the carriage, or I put mine in my pockets. All mine fit in my pockets. So that's how I would carry my parasols. But yeah, they're very convenient. They sit in your lap. They're not giant monstrosities. Nice little images, and I love the contrast between the woman who is actually engaged in work, skirts pinned up. This one is called The First Argument. It is very late 1850s. So we have two ladies. We have the maid in the background who is coming to see what the commotion is, and then we have the bride, or the wife, the young wife. So she's wearing a morning cap. It's very nice find. It doesn't really cover much of her hair, but it covers a little bit. And plain collar, white plain. Some sort of plaid dress. She has buttons down her front. She has pagoda sleeves or fuller sleeves. So this is either silk or wool. Open under sleeves. But again, her dress does not match her cap. That's totally fine. Looks like she might be wearing earrings. The undersleeves do look like they have some lace on them, which would be quite fun and not quite expensive, but you know, a little bit of lace here and there is a great way to add to your wardrobe. Beautiful large plaid. There's her little square cut shoes. She's wearing an apron. This is probably a silk apron. There are fancy silk aprons all over the place. I think the Met has several of them. I believe Ensembles of the Past has kits for some fancy aprons. If you are into making your own one. I have a black silk apron, fancy apron that I started when I first started reenacting almost 15 years ago, and it is still not done because it was my event project. I only worked on it at events, and I have a bad habit of not working at events. I bring projects and then I sit and talk the whole time and waste my time. I mean, talking to people isn't waste time, but you know what I mean. So one day I'll have this. Maybe. Anyway, I love her long breakfast ribbons. I am a huge fan of long ribbons flowing from the hair. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I like long hair, and this is kind of reminiscent of that, but I like, you know, when they have the lappets down on the headdresses. I like long ribbons. I'm just a huge fan of long things coming from the head. I don't know what it is. That's just personal preference. Let's talk about the maid. So she is also wearing a cap, plain collar. She might be wearing a wool dress. She has a brooch on, which is even more than the lady of the house. She's wearing a pinner apron. This is more of a functional apron as opposed to a fancy apron. There's like a little bit different. She has a plainer color on, but the collars are still the same size. They still have the same lines. They look, oops, what did I do? They still look quite similar. They're just probably different materials. All right, next one. There's several images to look at. This is called Home Thoughts. It's 1856, so we see a couple ladies that we can look at. So there's one in the background we don't see a ton of. She has a very full bodice, collar. Instead of a brooch, she has a little necktie. Fashionable hair, covers her ears. She might be wearing a cap. It's hard to tell. Bishop sleeves, very fine material. You see how just it lays. It's probably sheer or semi-sheer, but you can see her cuff there for the bishop sleeves. Let's talk about the lady who's getting the little girl dressed. She's wearing a morning cap, not morning as in dead people, but morning as in time of day. A little bit of lace, covering most of the ears here with her hair, or with her hair. Silk ribbons. A little bit plainer than the last lady we saw, but still quite nice cap. She has a nice collar on, very fitted bodice. She's wearing a nice, looks like very sheer, or what they would call clear apron, maybe of what they would call muslin, something like that. Something a little bit more expensive, but still, it gives the illusion that you're, a home caretaker, working woman, without actually being of working materials and not quite functional in that way. The silk aprons especially are very nice if you're sewing in the parlor, because threads do not stick to silk, they slide right off, and so you don't, if you're wearing like a cotton or a wool dress or something that's a little bit stickier, I guess, that would, not like sticky as in food sticky, but it it would catch threads and you have loose threads all over your dress. Having a silk apron on to catch all those loose threads, they'll just slide right off into the floor and someone else can take care of that later. If you're doing that type of work in your home, like sewing. And also it just looks more domestic, I guess. I don't know. She has a nice dress on. This could be silk, it could be wool, but still very nicely fitted. And again, she has that clear apron over top. This lady is either coming or going. She's either taking off gloves or putting on gloves. It's hard to tell. She has her nice green bonnet with matching ribbons. Her trims at her bonnets are a little bit higher up, so we see that progression up to the top. She has a veil on. Veils are not for morning. I forgot to mention that earlier. Veils are not just for morning. There are specific morning veils, but the vast majority of veils you see are not morning. They are just nice veils. So she has a mantle or, it's like probably a mantle on. So again, she's either coming or going. Nice little gloves here. Looks like maybe a changeable skirt, maybe blue and red. Sometimes you get that in paintings and it's quite fun. That would be what we call shot silk today. So you put one color on the loom and you weave with another color. And as you walk, you just get all the colors and it shimmers as you walk. It's quite pretty. And we have the older lady here, so she has her glasses, her little spectacles on. Hair is still quite fashionable. She has a nice, very clear, fine cap with silk ribbons that are falling down. Nice wider collar, similar to that lady's collar. Probably worked in some sort of embroidery. It looks like she has a neck bow with maybe a brooch over top, because that is a thing. Sometimes you see brooch, sometimes you see necktie, sometimes you see both. She has a nice... This could be an evening dress that she has like a removable pelerine over top. This could just be trim. Both are totally period options. She has funnel sleeves. That looks to me like open undersleeves. I guess it could be pulled in, closed undersleeves, but they look like open undersleeves to me. But a nice fun color. And again, nothing really matches. It just kind of all works together as an outfit. So I don't think you have to match everything to look wealthier. I think we have a tendency to like to match far more than they did. You wouldn't have worn a lavender dress with a lavender bonnet, with a lavender parasol, with lavender, like that just looks all one tone. They loved color back then. They absolutely loved color. And as many colors as you could fit in an outfit, the better. There was some form of color theory where you would wear the opposite of a color wheel with the outfit or like trim it. So like blue and orange are popular colors together. In this particular time period, the later 1850s, blue and olive green. I've seen like 4 dresses that were like olive green trimmed with blue. It's like the weirdest combination to me, but they liked it. They really enjoyed that. Putting lots of different colors in your dresses and in your outfits is a great way to look more Victorian. We already looked at this lady last time, so oh dear, we're not going to spend too much time on her. So she has a nice fancy bonnet. Looks like it might be silk of some sort. Very small bonnet ribbons, but that also might just be the fashion plate cut them off so you can see her dress. They can cut at an angle. Nice fine collar here. Looks like it's worked. This, I think they're going for silk moire with the design, and that silk looks like silk moire. And then some sort of cutaway. It's probably silk. Ribbon of some kind, either velvet or silk. This looks like a summer or spring image, so she's wearing a mantle. It wouldn't be uncommon to have a mantle or some sort of outerwear even in the summer, but they were usually sheer and fine. The outerwear is meant to more soften the figure. It wasn't just for warmth. And so you do see like lace. Like this is a very nice fancy that's some deep lace mantle, or perhaps a shawl. I guess it does fit more like a shawl than a mantle. So yeah, shawl. You would absolutely see sheer and lace shawls, mantles, the whole gamut of outerwear you can find in sheer, fine materials, specifically for summer. She does have closed undersleeves, which is fun. We don't see the actual dress sleeve, but we do see her closed undersleeves. This is called A Visit to the Schoolroom, 1859. We're not going to talk much about the school mistress right here. We can a little bit. I guess she'd fit more with... they kind of does fit with the, not rich, but like dressing nicely. I love the hats and the bonnets in the background. You can see all the veils coming down. I think it's so fun. Anyway, so we have 2 ladies here. Let's go talk about schoolmistress first. So she has a cap on. Cap, some sort of red bow. There's her necktie right here. So I'm not entirely sure what that red thing is. Whether it may just be, there's some red here, so maybe it's just left over from her cap. She's wearing a very nice lace collar, or worked collar, most likely, so embroidered. Plainer black dress, could be wool, it could be silk. She has looks like red woolen undersleeves on, which is fun. Open sleeve. She has some sort of cape or pelerine on. Like I have a black silk dress in my collection that looks very similar, except it has bishop sleeves, but it has a removable pelerine. So the dress goes all the way up. It's a just plain. There's no trim on my original dress whatsoever, but then it has that removable pelerine for a little bit of an extra look. This lady has open sleeves instead of bishop sleeves. And then there's the mom dropping off kid. So she has a straw bonnet, full frill all the way across. Hair mostly covering her ears. She has blue ribbons, blue curtain to her bonnet, long bonnet ribbons, some fun ones. She is wearing a shawl of some sort. So it looks like a square shawl that she has folded over. I have a couple originals that are that as well. Nice, usually these are light fine wool. She has a pattern to her dress, looks like a chevron pattern. It could be cotton, it could be wool, it could be silk. There's no way to tell. But yeah, very nice image. Not necessarily wealthy people, and neither of these ladies are wealthy, but they're still very well put together. This is a nicer outfit for them. She's going to drop off her kid to school, so she's going to dress up a little bit. And then she is working, but her work is in a more professional capacity. So they're both going to wear a step above what we looked at last month, but neither one of these scream wealth. Like there's nothing super fancy. The dresses aren't trimmed extensively. She might have something at her sleeve, but nothing extensive. Nice fine lace cap, but again, you can still afford those at working class. If that's something you wanted to spend your money on, you could. Dunce cap over here, but we're not talking about him. But anyway, yeah. And then somebody stole a cap. He's probably the one who needs the dunce cap. There's just so much information in this image. And so many pinafores, so many children. One day we're going to get to talk about children. Today's not that day though. Alright, this is 1860, so this is a stereopic shop on Broadway Street in New York City. This is circa 1860, so we see all the things for sale, how the shop's set up. We have two ladies who are shopping though. So these are going to be nicer dresses for shopping. They are both wearing crinolines. 1860, yeah, that would be normal. Mantles or cloaks, both of them. Gloves, well, she's wearing gloves. That one might be wearing gloves. She probably is, just given that she's out. Looks like an a la disposition dress over here. Either wearing one petticoat over top of her crinoline or none at all, because you see the rungs of her hoop a little bit. Collar, a little bit of collar here as well. One-piece dresses, most likely, even though we can't quite see. That I think is just a flaw in the image here. We have a fringe, looks like fringe across hers. Nothing particularly fancy, it's just, nice. Given that their bonnets do not cover their face, which fashion bonnets should not cover or shade your face, that's what parasols are for. If you wear a fashion bonnet, you usually need a parasol to go along with it. They might both be straw, they could be silk. That one kind of looks like straw to me with like silk ribbons. You see her frill, a little bit of her bow tie here. She has her bonnet bow as well. Maybe a plume. Maybe that's what I'm seeing. Again, it's really hard to tell, but there's so many things could be going on with that. But yeah, nice little bonnet shapes. Notice how they're both differently. They're both shaped differently. This one comes up further. It's more of like a backwards C, whereas this one's a little bit straighter. There are varieties in bonnets as well. Like there are different styles, different types of bonnets that you could pick based on what you like. It looks to me like she has her face actually veiled with a white veil. I don't see a veil in her bonnet, but veils are basically the sunglasses of the 19th century. That could actually be a blue veil too. White existed as veils. They don't function as veils very well. Black would be very common for veils in this time period. I've seen blue, green, purple was later, I think. Brown, obviously, lots of brown veils. Yeah, but that sometimes blue photographs as white. So that could be a blue veil, but it could also be white. It's very hard to tell colors from photographs because the light changes. Like you can take the picture of the same gown in different lights and they'll look a totally different shade. Period photography is fun. Alright, this one I do believe to be more millineresses. I think these are millineresses. because of the bonnet blocks and the fact that they are all holding hats and bonnets. So I think these ladies are working in a shop. And so we see plain dresses, working women. She has an apron of some kind. She could be wearing a silk apron even for this particular type of work. She's not doing anything dirty where she wants more of a functional apron. I think a fashion apron would be totally fine for her. She has a little jacket that looks like it matches her dress. Collar, this is 1860s by the way, earlier 1860s. Collar here. She has a light colored dress on. She has a print on, so that could be cotton, could be wool, it could be cotton, it could be wool. So, but they all have fashionable hair. She's smiling in the background. I think she's smiling too, actually. It's quite fun. This is probably more of an impromptu image. I mean, they're not in a studio. It's probably the photographer came over and was like, hey, I want to take photographs, taking photographs of the town. Do you want to come out? And whoever wanted to come out, and they picked whatever they wanted to showcase. And this isn't a advertisement photograph. Like, there's not enough detail in there for that. It's more or less just these ladies working in a shop, and someone said, hey, I want to take a photograph. You want to come out? And so whatever they were wearing, that's what they came out with. So corseted. I haven't talked about that, but all the images we have seen have been of corseted ladies based on bust shape, torso shape, how the dress fits, all of that. But you see her bust line is higher up, more in their armpit. Looks like she has bishop sleeves. I can't see the sleeves on any of the other ladies, but they are all wearing hoops. So again, working women in hoops. Maybe a silk apron even. But nice dresses, either silk, they could be silk dresses, they could be wool dresses, they could even be cotton dresses. That's totally fine for this profession. But yeah, nice images of some millinerses, or what we believe to be millinerses. I would say definitely so, based on the fact that they look like they're showcasing work, and then there's a bonnet block right there. And there's a little girl over here. Alright, this one is this is the very latest part of our time period, 1862. This is the Yellow Hospital in Manassas, Virginia. So this is probably an officer's wife. She has a hat with a veil, pagoda sleeves, which are on their way out at this time, which means this is either a silk or a wool dress. I would venture to guess wool. It is July. She has does not appear to have any undersleeves on. She could have some that are hiding under there, but doesn't appear so. These big pagoda sleeves do happen in 1860, 1861. Not the best fitted bodice, but still nice. Gathered front, which again is fine in the silk or wool with a waistband. Her ears are showing, hair parted down the middle. Nothing particular fancy about this. And this is a hospital, so we don't know if this is an officer's wife or someone from the town who's coming over to help with nursing. Like, there's so many options for her, but she's wearing a hoop still. Nice little hat, again with the veil. Have a little toddler with her. But yeah, nice image of someone who's in a nice dress, but not a wealthy. Like, this is not wealthy. It's not the best fitted. It is not no fun accessories. Maybe a slightly older style, but it's still not old-fashioned. I mean, it's just not the latest fashion. We're still crinoline, but yeah, still a nice image. This is also very late 1850s to early 1860s. Hair that covers the ear. Looks like she's wearing earrings. Nice collar, small, neat collar, little brooch. This is like soutache braids made into like a little daisy. So you see it. It's on the bodice and the sleeves, not the skirt. Which is a nice way to have trim, but not overwhelm yourself with the work or have to pay a seamstress to do it extra, This could be fringe. This could be, looks like fringe to me. It could be like a lace type thing. But I love her open sleeves like this, how they kind of come to these points. I think that's quite fun. She has closed under sleeves, pair of bracelets. Again, more of that trim at the bodice. Yes, right at the nipple line. This is quite popular in the 1860s and late 1850s. I have seen a photograph. I wish I had saved it, but I have seen a photograph. There were exactly 2 tassels on this dress. Do you want to guess where those tassels were? Right here and right here. No other trim on the entire dress. Literally just 2 tassels, exactly where her nipples would be. There's another dress in the Met that's also around 1862, and it has it's purple silk dress, cross hatches all over it, and the skirt as well. And there's like a little cross hatch or a little pound sign, hashtag, whatever, literally right over the breasts. Breasts were not as sexualized as they are today back then. And so that is not like a weird, it's weird. It is a very weird thing to us, but it wouldn't have been like provocative back then. It's just, this is the best area to trim a dress, because when you're moving your arms, you're hiding this. So like right here's, you know, kind of where you want to put trim, you know? It draws attention to an area where we likely wouldn't, because breasts are so sexualized in our time period, but that was not necessarily the case for all time periods. Different time periods have different areas of the body that they sexualized more than others. So yeah, this is, I keep saying one day I'm going to do a dress like this, just for the fun of it. I like this because it's not just there. I would never do something that was just right, that would just be a little too much for me. But something like this that it kind of almost looks like an afterthought, you know, or unfortunate placement. I would do something like that. That would be fun. But no buttons, just probably hooks and eyes for her closures. But yeah, that I purposely put this one in here so I could purposely talk about the nipple placement of trims. But yeah, probably a silk dress based on how it is. You can kind of see how white her fabric is. Oh, I think this is Elizabeth Toppings. She has a lot of good photographs. I think that's maybe her mark. But you can see it's not to the floor. There's hem braid on her dress though, which means she wanted to protect her dress. You can see how white her fabric is. There's the puckering. She's not handling the fabric as she ought to have, so there's a lot of puckering in the skirt. But again, this isn't necessarily something that's like super fashionable. This is a totally fine middle class dress as a best dress. Like that's just not super wealthy. It's a nice dress. All right, getting towards the end here. This one I pulled just because I want to talk about sunbonnets for a while. So this is a nice dress. I mean, it's probably sheer. This is a very popular style for sheer dresses. Look, it's open right here, so it probably doesn't close at all. She's holding it closed with the brooch and the belt, and you can kind of see it slipping right here. But a nice belt. I use that same type of clasp with garters. We use the same type of clasp for the little belt for the little boy that, wait, y'all haven't seen that video. I made it last week, so I thought it came out. It comes out like 2 months from now. Never mind then. When we make the boys' tunic for the 1860s, I use the same type of belt buckle. But nice fancy belt here. This could be a sheer, semi-sheer dress. Looks like there's bishop sleeves. Nothing particularly fancy about it. It is self-fabric trim, so this is very well could be a cotton sheer dress. It could be a wool, you know, could be really several things. Dropped arm side. She does have a sunbonnet, a sheer sunbonnet. You can see how sheer that is. And it is a slat bonnet. You see her slats. What I love is that her hair isn't even, someone didn't tell her that her hair needed to be pushed back here or pulled over here. But, you know, imperfect hair is fine too. But yeah, nice image of someone who's put together, but probably not super wealthy. We've already discussed jewelry is fine for working class people. We've seen even the people who are actually engaged in working activities wearing jewelry. So that's not necessarily something that reads as fancy, you know? It's really the types of materials. This is our last one. This is earlier part of our time period. So we have a very full bonnet here with all the trims and frills and ribbons and flowers. And again, they're focused more at the sides here. So it's one of the reasons we can tell it's earlier. Short little ribbons. Silk or wool dress. She has a very nice brooch. Let's see if we can, it's hard to get detail on that. It's a fun little brooch. Someone had gilded it a little bit. A lace collar maybe, or worked at least. And she has a mantle on. There's a sleeve of her dress, so it matches her dress, and open under sleeves it looks like. So we get some little detail. There might be some self-fabric trim on that sleeve. Or hook and eye closure, either hook and eye closure or no closure. But a fun little image nonetheless. So I think that is it. Fantastic. We got through our images. Okay, so hopefully that helped. Again, we're seeing the same layers as we saw before, but what we're seeing is slightly different styles. So like sleeve styles, typically you'll see more pagoda sleeves or the open funnel sleeves. You'll see that more in silk and wools than you would ever in cottons. Sheers as well. Sheers are an exception there. We're going to see more lace with fancier people. We're going to see more outerwear. We're going to see maybe a silk apron instead of a cotton or linen apron. Other than that, they're basically the same things. So as we kind of talked about last month, it's hard to portray either a rich or poor person and look either rich or poor. Everyone to the spectator's eyes is going to look rich. Like if you have a well put together outfit, even if you are slumming it, there's a cat outside, if you're slumming it on the farm, you're going to look wealthy, and you're going to have people tell you you look too nice to be doing that work. And so it can be very hard, if you're doing it correctly, if you're doing living history correctly, if you're doing the 19th century correctly, it can be very hard to accurately portray poor because everything looks so fancy to modern eyes. So we talked about a little bit last time having, if you mend things properly where it's invisible, it's going to look like it's not mended, like it's not worn. So it kind of takes a visitor coming up to you and telling you look too nice for you to, lift your skirts and like show all the piecing and everything you had to do to it. It's hard to accurately portray that to the public to where they get it visually right off the bat without having to ask, is what I'm saying. Unless you're actually sitting down to mend, then you can obviously show that. And sometimes it's just as easy as taking a well-worn dress and putting it in a mending basket while you're doing other activities, so people may pick it up or notice that you have mending. And that may lead to the conversation a little bit more of, oh yeah, I burned a hole in that dress. I did it to this dress too. You want to see? It kind of show the before and after type thing. That could be a way you could do it. If anyone else has other ideas, this could be a great discussion point of like, what do you do as a living historian to accurately portray that you are working within period and documented realms. Or documented practices, I should say. But really a lot of it comes down to fabrics and trims, which can be very hard to come across, which can be very hard to visually educate the public without actually speaking to them about it. What I personally like to do, because I have more dresses than I ought to, is take a basic woman's wardrobe with me to events and I just hang it in a closet. Even if I'm not wearing it for that event, I'll still bring it, because that invites visitors to come talk to me more about it, because they'll go, that's a lot of dresses. And I'm like, that's actually pretty normal. If you look at wardrobe lists of working class women, that's fairly normal for the socioeconomic status and this particular impression that I'm doing. That's normal. So let's kind of, and that invites me to go over and go, okay, this is my working dress that I wear all the time. It looks nice, but let me tell you it's not, and here's all the evidence of it not being nice. This is my next working dress that is going to be the working dress when this one finally falls apart. It's a nicer-ish dress, but I don't wear it too often. This is my really nice dress that I wear. This is the one I wear more for winter. Kind of going through that and talking about it with visitors can really help. So having things like that already in place, like anticipating the fact that they're not going to ask just off the bat, but putting little nuggets, I guess, around where you are to invite the conversation. So you have the conversation more than you otherwise would have, is basically what I'm getting at. That's how I've handled it in the past. I'd love to hear other ideas about that. But again, it all really comes down to trims and the fabrics. So cotton dresses are typically, particularly washable cotton dresses, are typically self-trimmed, which means they're trimmed in their own fabric. Which means when you wash them, that's easier to do. You don't have to take off trims. Typically, you're going to see more washable types of button that you're using a button closure. For silks and wools that are spot cleaned, they have the fancier trims. Silk trims are very common. Even on a working class garment, you could have a silk trim that's a cheaper silk. They have varieties of materials as well. I have a little girl's dress that's in the back room. I just pulled it off display at the museum. It has two different types of braid on it. There was a nicer braid that they tried to make the dress. The dress is out of very poor quality cloth, but they tried to braid it and they ran out, and she hadn't quite finished the jacket yet, so she went and purchased a very inferior quality braid to finish it off, and that inferior quality braid has frayed and it's not the right color anymore. It doesn't look the same as the rest of the braiding. Because she thought she had enough to do it. Maybe she had it left over from another project, and she ran out at the last minute and had to finish off with what she could afford. And so things like that can show class a little bit more subtly, but again, everything that we're going to do is going to be subtle because the layers should basically be the same for the vast majority of people. So again, fabrics, trims, that's how you're showing your wealth. if you're wanting to portray someone super, super wealthy, that's going to be more, again, a lot more silks, a lot more very fine fabrics. We're talking fancier jewelry than your basic bog oak or your Gouda percher. We're talking fancier things, so maybe with jewels, higher quality materials, better fitting, more up-to-date fashions, a lot more frills, a lot more just things on your dresses. Perhaps your skirts are hard to trim and they're expensive to trim because there's so much of them in this time period. And so maybe trimming your skirt can be a great way to show, ooh, this is a nicer dress and I'm fancy. That sort of thing can be a clue as well. So that's what you're going to be looking for if you're looking to portray someone who's extremely wealthy. You're looking more at laces, you're looking at imported materials, things that are very sought after and very expensive. And then if you're portraying someone who's just put together, like a millineress, you're looking more at the lower end cotton or wool dress, maybe in a print, a darker color that would hide stains. You're looking more at, okay, you still have a silk apron, but maybe not as fancy, maybe not as trimmed, that sort of thing. So that's kind of how we're differentiating classes. To the 19th century, the class differences would be very stark. To our eyes, because we're looking at it from foreign eyes, they are going to look basically the same. And that's one of the things as living historians that we have to navigate to educate the public properly. So hopefully all that helped you dissect some new images to kind of see what we're looking at when we're looking to put together a put-together outfit is what I'm going to call it. Going into town, shopping, even like a regular dress for a middle class or an upper class lady, that sort of outfit. So that is about it for today. If you've enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe to the channel, click that little bell notification so you're notified anytime I upload a new video. And as always, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here in the next video.